Thank you very much. Ashley Carrick, you have 2 minutes to introduce yourself.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I hope my internet holds out tonight. If it does not, I apologize and I will try to get back on as quick as possible. But I just want to start by thanking the NAACP for hosting. This is the first candidate forum that I know that I've gotten an opportunity to be a part of this election cycle, and I really appreciate the chance to address the members and also the community in this way. And thank you to Dr. Hirsch for monitoring and for the listeners as well. I am Ashley Carrick. I am a 4th generation lifelong Alaskan. I grew up in Anchorage. I was born and raised there, moved up to Fairbanks over a decade ago, and I've made my home here ever since. I am deeply passionate about Alaska. I have the campaign slogan, "All in for Alaska," because I would rather be here in our state on its worst day than anywhere else on its best day. And at the core of my decision to run was my want to serve this state for the long term. I consider my time in Fairbanks as a homecoming, a generation in the making. My grandmother grew up in Fairbanks, and she ended up getting married and moving to Healy, where my grandfather was a teamster at Usabelli Coal Mine, and I grew up playing in the library where she was a librarian there. My work background has been pretty diverse. I've worked in the nonprofit field. Most recently, I've worked for the last 6 years as the chief of staff to Representative Wool down in Juneau, who is the outgoing legislator for this seat. And my campaign platform is built around 3 main goals from my time working and living in this state. I want to promote Alaska's economic future, preserve access to education and higher education, and protect the public health, safety, and well-being of all Alaskans. At the end of the day, I want to see a state where everyone has a future where we can thrive and where we can all succeed.
This first question, do you support a constitutional convention? Why or why not?
Great, thank you so much. I am 100% not in support of a constitutional convention. I have tried to do outreach throughout this campaign cycle in addition to my own campaign to make sure voters understand the real cost that a constitutional convention could have. Our state is very lucky, and in a lot of ways, we have a model and modern constitution that really puts the rights and privileges of Alaskans first. And we're also fairly lucky because our constitution was written fairly recently in our state's history, so we can actually go and watch those proceedings and look back and understand a lot better than maybe other states can what some of the motivations of the Constitution Convention members were. I also am concerned about the potential to limit our rights and protections we currently have if we had a constitutional convention. And I do think that a constitutional convention opens us up for a potential free-for-all for special interest groups, many of which might come from outside of the state of Alaska. So I encourage Alaskans to oppose a convention.
I have been so mixed on this topic. I have been going back and forth and researching this topic. And it seems like every time I learn something new about it, I'll start thinking maybe we should, and then I'll learn another fact and maybe we shouldn't. And one of the things that's really started to change my mind about it is the outside money that's being pushed to say no. The Say No campaign, it seems like there's a lot of money that's coming in to support the no vote on that. And that part bothers me. It really reminds me a lot of ballot measure 2, where a lot of outside money came in to support that. And I understand that there are some subjects that would really do well with the Constitutional Convention. The permanent fund dividend, some judicial reform, and others. And I guess in the end, I do trust the Alaskan people. I'm making my mind up as we go here. I could see one. I could see a constitutional convention. I do like the checks and balances of it, but just to let you know, it's something that I'm learning about all the time.
What will you do during your term to protect LGBTQ constituents and address the problems they face every day?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. I am proud to identify as a bisexual woman, and if elected, I would be one of potentially the first cohort of openly LGBT legislators to be elected to the Alaska State Legislature. Currently, Alaska and South Dakota are the only 2 states that have not elected any openly LGBT legislators before, and I would be happy to break that barrier finally for Alaskans as well. I tell people that I didn't run because I'm LGBT, but I do think that the fact that I am an LGBT woman and the fact that I'm running is important, and it sends a message. Additionally, as a legislator, I would hope to continue working on and gain consensus to pass a non-discrimination law for the state. I think that's important, and it's long overdue. I also support social and emotional learning. Grier Hopkins had a bill to that effect, which isn't related to LGBT education or anything about that. But I think that when we look at the health outcomes of LGBT students in our state, and as someone with a master's in public health, I have concerns about how we are adequately supporting our students and adults in the population who identify as LGBT. And I want to do what I can to improve both health outcomes and community support for these individuals.
We do have federal protections for the community, and I do think that they do protect them adequately. I do have a lot of LGBTQ people that I hire and employ. I value that community a lot, and I think they're a very significant part of our community. And so I do believe that they should be treated as everyone else and have the same rights as everyone else. And since I had some time left,
Yeah.
On the
Sorry.
Constitutional Convention question, I meant to say, ended up saying yes, and I meant no on that. So I don't know how to fix that.
You just did.
Okay.
With the time that you have left, do you want to clarify?
On the Constitutional Convention, or the,
Sure.
yeah, I was going back and forth, and I was talking about the things that made me say yes and no, and so I misspoke there, and I apologize that, and sorry for any inconvenience to the people keeping track of this. On the LGBTQ question, as I said, I think that they're a very big part of our community, and I value them, and I do think that we do try to protect and protect them.
How will you work with your colleagues to continue to address climate crises?
Yeah, this is another really great question, and I definitely do support climate legislation. I think that gaining consensus on this issue has been a challenge the legislature has faced. And so whether people are supporting additional renewable resource development, or whether we're just looking at how to reduce our current fossil fuel extraction resource development, or at least put firm regulatory oversight in place on those industries, those are just some options. We have potentially a lot of solutions we can employ and work across the aisle to gain consensus on. One thing that I think is really important, as somebody who's endorsed by the Alaska Center, I really want to emphasize, I believe that our current natural resource development and our fossil fuel economy is a part of our present, and it's something that really has fueled Alaska's economy for a long time. It's a part of my family's history, but it's not our long-term future. And right now, Alaska is blessed with having quite a bit of federal infrastructure funding that we can utilize to focus on projects that are forward-thinking, that are going to help us get through not just the next 5 years, but 10, 50, 100 years. And I want to plan for that future, and I believe that future includes renewables and solutions to address climate change and help our communities get through the devastating impacts of climate disaster.
Thank you for the question. On the issue of climate, I think one of the biggest things that Alaska can do is continue developing our natural gas. I think that is one of the things that can help our climate the most, is reducing our footprint. And also, Alaska is doing a lot of work with developing the electric cars, and there are charging stations throughout the state of Alaska. We've got one barrier in there between Cantwell and I believe it's 50 miles past, where we are having a hard time putting a charging station. And I think this is the direction that we need to go, is solutions that actually reduce our carbon footprint. So I think that's the direction that we need to take, is supporting more things that, whether it's different sources of energy or transportation. I think that's the direction the state should go.
Support legislation such as that proposed last session by Senator L.V. Gray Jackson for a statewide ban on chokeholds, a ban on shooting at moving vehicles, required body cameras, required comprehensive reporting on use of force, required de-escalation, and cultural competency training.
Yeah, I'm actually familiar with Senator Gray Jackson's bill. I was really pleased to see it introduced. And in the hectic nature of the session last year, didn't get a chance working with the House Finance Committee to actually go through that legislation for my boss. But I definitely do support legislation to that effect, and I hope to see it reintroduced in the next legislature. I think Alaska has unfortunately had far too many incidents, many of which have ended up in the news, many of which have happened in Fairbanks in the interior, related to officer-involved conflict and officer-involved shootings. And many of these incidents, in fact, a great majority of them, involve Alaska Native individuals or people of color in general. And that is a tragedy. There is so much that we can do to avoid these incidents from taking place and to prioritize de-escalation. I also had the opportunity recently to serve on a grand jury. So I got to see the criminal justice side from the court side as well. And I think I also would just expand on the question and say I support looking into ways to improve outcomes for individuals.
Thank you. I first want to thank our peace officers out there. It's a really tough job that they have, going to work every day, facing some of the things that none of us would want to face, and they do it on a daily basis. Are you talking to me? Because I see you talking. Oh, okay. And when I look at this legislation, I don't know if I've got it correct or not, but I thought the reporting of the use of, the reporting of use of force, I thought that was passed. Or anyway, there's parts of that legislation that I really do support. I think a ban on chokeholds is very important. The part about shooting at vehicles at first sight, I think it's a no-brainer, but what if that vehicle is shooting at you and the peace officer needs to respond? So I think we need to look at some of the unintended consequences of these situations. I think that this bill is important. I think we need to look at it and just find out what we can do and what's best for our peace officers, because I do believe that they would know best in this. But yes, I do think there are some things in there that definitely need to pass, especially the ban on chokeholds.
If elected, how can you support community and law enforcement solutions for the missing and murdered?
Thank you so much. This question, like Elijah and Kevin both mentioned, is sobering and it's devastating. And it is really tragic that Alaska leads the nation in missing and murdered individuals, and particularly for Indigenous women and people of color. We have experienced so many missing cases and murdered cases here in Fairbanks in the interior as well. So this is something that plagues both our state and our communities here in interior Alaska. I think personally we have to start this issue and work on it from the ground up. We need diversity in law enforcement. I mentioned supporting in the last question what I believe are reasonable and common sense preventions for law enforcement kind of overstepping their bounds. But at the end of the day, I do have as a platform goal providing for the public safety of Alaskans. So we also need to have enough officers to be able to respond both here in Fairbanks and in our rural communities. And we don't have that right now. I've had the great fortune of being able to work in rural Alaska as a research assistant here in the interior and having the experience of being involved in a public safety situation where there wasn't someone to respond. And the fear that I experienced is something that I cannot imagine multiplying over and over again. And we know that so many people across our state live in fear of what could happen day to day without public safety help. So we need diversity in law enforcement. We need adequate law enforcement. We need people who are trained to investigate missing and murdered cases. And we also need community pathways for accountability for officers and for law enforcement and for outreach to work on these cases. All of these things are extremely important, and ultimately whatever we can do to move the needle and improve outcomes for all of our communities and individuals are absolutely essential.
It's a tragic thing that Alaska is leading these statistics, and coming from Kotzebue, this kind of hits close to home, to be honest. Try not to get emotional on this question. This has recently hit the news for the last few years. We had an attorney general come out to Alaska because of this problem being so bad. And we can't forget these people. These people are a part of our community, and it's important that we follow up on this. One of the things that's the problem is that we don't have enough trained people to investigate these cases up in the villages. And so to fix that, really, in my opinion, is that funding's needed. If you really want to get down to the root of the problem, that we're going to have to pass some legislation that we can get funding, which can help with training and help solving some of these cases. And as I believe everybody agrees, that's very important. We need to do that. It needs to be done. Thank you.
What do you intend to do about the poor returns of salmon in the Yukon and Kuskokwim drainages? How will you work with your fellow legislators to address the current subsistence food crisis?
Yeah, and yet another really important issue and really pressing issue for Alaska and for the interior. I personally my hierarchy is set in my mind, and it has been since I was very young and throughout my time living and working here. I believe that subsistence comes first. If we can't even provide for the needs of Alaskans here at home who are living off of these resources, then we have got a crisis on our hands and we need to do something about it immediately. And that's the challenge that some of our communities are facing. After that, I believe that personal use fishing for Alaskans comes second, and commercial, in my mind, is a really important part of Alaska's economy and our industry. But I do think that right now, the hierarchy is flipped on its head, and we have prioritized subsistence as sometimes a last, only if we have the right escapement goals met, resort. And really, what I would like to see us focus on is what we can control here at home. We can control the amount of bycatch that we're taking here in Alaska, and I think that should be where our focus is in the short term. In the long term, climate factors are definitely impacting our subsistence fisheries, and we need to ensure that we're addressing some of those issues for the long term as well. I do think that there's a hierarchy that exists where all three, commercial, personal use, and subsistence, can exist in harmony. I don't think that they're being adequately balanced right now, and I want to work on solutions to make sure that we're prioritizing subsistence for Yukon and Kuskokwim drainages first.
This is a huge problem in the state of Alaska. I believe we look at 140,000 salmon as a average return, and we're not even hitting 20% of that currently. It's been recently talked about that this was a bycatch problem, but in that research, one of the things that they're looking at is it possible that some of that bycatch is actually Asian salmon, which would be farmed salmon. So right now, what's really needed is a bigger return of salmon into the Yukon-Kuskokwim rivers. And the department is looking at what is causing that right now, whether it's climate affecting the food, the feeding grounds of the salmon. And so there's not really a great answer right now if you start talking to all the people that do the research on the fish. But what is needed is more resources to these departments so that we can find out what is going on. And that's the best answer I have right now, and that's the best answer that I've gotten from the people that are working on these research projects. In fact, I was just in a meeting today on this topic.
What is the biggest need in your district, and how would you address it?
It's hard to pick just one issue for any of our districts. Alaska currently faces a lot of challenges, and we also have a lot of opportunities. In my district, it's pretty easy for me to say education is my biggest priority for what I can provide for my constituents. I think both K-12 and UA education need to be prioritized and invested in. And that includes both monetary investment and a cultural investment on the part of our legislators. I believe in increasing the base student allocation for K-12, in providing for a retirement system that adequately attracts and retains qualified educators to work and stay in our district. And even though it's been knocked down by the state Supreme Court as not constitutional, I'd like to explore ways and opportunities the legislature can ensure stable and predictable funding in the wake of not being able to forward fund K-12 education any longer. And then the university is critically important to District 35. House District 35 is blessed to have the flagship campus for the University of Alaska here in our district, and I am uniquely positioned to be the strongest advocate that the legislature has for the university. I am a student, I have been a student, a staff. I'm currently teaching at the UAF Community and Technical College downtown. I'm also an alumni. And so being able to provide for UA education is both a priority for our district and something that I'm really personally passionate about. I've carried the University of Alaska's budget for the last 2 years in legislative cycles. And I've also been able to work on legislation to benefit the university, including reauthorization of technical and vocational education in the legislature. And I've also been the point person covering both K-12 and university issues for Representative Wolf for my 5 years working with him. So ultimately, in our district, I want to see stable and predictable funding for education. I want to see investment, both, again, monetarily and culturally from our legislators on education issues. And I want to work with the educators, the staff, and the administrators in our district to figure out the best solutions for moving forward.
It is a very large district and it is very diverse. As it was said, that the University of Fairbanks UAF is a very important part of our district and important part of our state. One of the things that I have heard is a reason that for the young people to stay here, they graduate from UAF and they end up leaving our state. And what I think that we need to look at is a pipeline from education to jobs. That's one of the things I've heard out there, you know, door knocking and then talking to people. One of the things that wasn't mentioned is I started hearing more and more and more about is crime. We're starting to see more crime in our districts. As the inflation starting to go up and people are having more or harder time making day-to-day paychecks, we're seeing drug use going up, and all those things combined. There's neighborhoods that I've knocked on before that have never had a crime problem, and now we're starting to see it more and more and more. I think that really needs to be addressed. There's a few neighborhoods in our district that have been just repeatedly going to the troopers, going to whoever they can to get some relief from the crime problem. I do agree that education is an issue that we need to address. K through 12, one of the things I've heard is that the parents are wanting to have more say in not only what the kids learn in school, but how they're learning it. I've heard that repeatedly. Inflation, fuel oil prices, it's been a real big mixture this year. And so I think that we do need to try to get as big a PFD as we can to the people. I think that it came at a right time this year. And I think that if we would have had one of the smaller PFDs that we've gotten before, I think there's a lot of people that would have been in trouble. It's going to be a hard winter this year. And a lot of people are worried about making it through. And so I keep hearing that over and over and over again. So this is a great question. And do I have 1 minute left or okay? It is a really good question because as you're walking out there, you really get to learn about the district and really hear what they're saying, and then trying to put together commonalities between, gosh, your airport area versus Chena Ridge and Chena Pump to Lakeview to all these different precincts, and finding out what they have in common and what they have different, and how to put those needs together. And you do start hearing some repetitive things going on. One of those is crime, one of those is inflation, and some of those are education. Thank you very much. It's a great question, by the way.
First, as an elected leader, would you vote to codify the right to all and any reproductive healthcare options into law?
I'd have to say no.
Okay. Ashley Carrick, same question.
Yes.
Okay. Question number 2, and we'll start with Kevin McKinley. Question number 2, This is a longer question, bear with me. Last session, Senator Wilson carried Senate Bill 174, the Protect Natural Hairstyles Bill, that restricted workplaces and school districts from establishing any dress codes or regulations that discriminated against Black hairstyles. Through an amendment in the House, the workplace provisions were removed. That bill passed as amended, and thousands of Black Alaskans are still unprotected from hair discrimination. Do you support a bill protecting Black Alaskans from hair discrimination in the workplace?
Yeah.
Ashley Carrick, do you support a bill protecting Black Alaskans from discrimination in the workplace?
Yes.
Should Juneteenth be a state holiday? Ashley Carrick.
Yes.
Kevin McKinley, same question. Should Juneteenth be a state holiday?
Yes.
Kevin McKinley, do you support limits on campaign contributions by individuals or PACs or political action committees?
No.
Okay. And Ashley Carrick, yes or no, do you support limits on campaign contributions, either by individuals or by PACs?
Yes.
Okay, last question. Do you support the current ranked choice voting system? Kevin McKinley.
No.
Ashley Carrick.
Yes. For everybody who is online tonight listening, we can't see you or how many of you there are as the candidates, but I hope that it's a good audience turnout and that this has been an informative process for everyone. I am running because I am fiercely passionate about the state of Alaska. I'm a fourth generation Alaskan. I was born and raised here. This is my home. I intend to work for Alaska's prosperity and future, no matter what role or capacity I serve in, though I do hope to serve as the next representative for House District 35. I've held a variety of roles in this community. I've been on the Early Childhood Development Commission. I've served on the Board Diversity Committee for the school district. I've worked for the Fairbanks Summer Arts Festival as their board vice president and as a community volunteer. I want to see people who are experienced in office, people who understand both the procedural and political workings of the Alaska State Capitol, and I have that experience. I also have a background in public health. I understand social determinants of health, and I want to work to achieve equity and inclusion for all Alaskans, regardless of their background or socioeconomic status. In addition to being experienced, I'm energized. I am ready to work hard for this community on the complex challenges that we have and push us forward as a state towards the many opportunities that are laying right there at our feet as well. I plan to give this job and this work everything that I have. I also plan to work across the aisle with my colleagues, and I have experience to do that as well. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm all in for Alaska. What that means to me is that I'm not just working to kick the can down the road for 1 year or even 5 years. I'm looking to make long-term decisions, regardless of what that might mean for my own re-election, that are going to help advance the opportunities and the outcomes for Alaskans 10, 15, 100 years from now. We need people who are willing to go to Juneau and work hard on these complex issues, who are willing to work across the aisle, who are willing to take a hard look at everything we're facing and then figure out how with their colleagues, we're going to find solutions. And I intend to get the input of my constituents along the way. And I thank you all so much for listening. And I hope this is part of an ongoing conversation between myself and the community of Fairbanks and as House District 35 as well. Thank you all so much. And please vote on November 8th or before.
Thank you. I really want to thank everyone for putting this event on. I think it's really important. And I want to take this time to also apologize for not making this event in my last couple of runs for State House. You've been wonderful hosts, and you've put on a great event with great questions that really makes one think, which is important for somebody that wants to be a legislator for the state. As I said before, I'm a business person with locations throughout the state. I employ a diverse group of people. I've also worked with nonprofits and children's hospitals, and I really want to say that that's really given me a lot of experience on working with people, organizing people. And when you're down in Juneau, you have to remember that you're not just working for your district or your party. You're working for everyone. You're everyone's representative. And that is important for a legislator to know. And I want you to know that I will work hard down in Juneau for you to bring common sense solutions to these complex problems that we have that we need to do. And I'm working for all of us. And as it was said before, on November 8th or before, please get out and vote, because our voting numbers are awful. And if you know somebody that's not voting, please tell them to go vote. It's important. I want to thank you all very much. Go vote.